Aisha stood quietly at the edge of the big training hall. She was wearing plain black workout clothes and white sneakers. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She held a water bottle in one hand and looked around the room with calm eyes. The room was full of noise, laughter, and loud voices. Around her were over 20 strong men.
They laughed at her during
Marines
practice,
in training.
until she
They were
dropped
big,
4
muscular,
Marines
full of
in
energy and
seconds.
pride. They were joking, stretching, punching the air. Their bodies were trained for battle. Their minds were trained for war. But no one paid attention to Aisha. She was small, quiet, and didn't look like she belonged. Some of the men gave her quick glances, then looked away with smiles. Some whispered to each other. A few even laughed. "Is she lost?" one said in a low voice. "Maybe she's here to watch, not train," another joked. One of the taller Marines pointed at her and said, "She looks like she's here to take notes, not knock anyone down." Laughter followed. Aisha heard every word. She didn't flinch, she didn't respond. She just took a small breath and looked down at the floor. But in her heart, a small fire started to burn. The instructor finally walked in. He was a tall, serious man with gray hair and sharp eyes. Everyone stood straight. He looked around and said, "Welcome to Self-Defense Evaluation Week." His eyes stopped at Aisha. "Who's this?" he asked. "I'm Aisha," she said calmly. "I was invited to test your defense program." A few Marines raised their eyebrows. The instructor gave a short nod. "All right, if you're here, he said. "Let's begin." The warm-up started. Aisha joined the group. She moved quietly, stretched with control, did every step with focus. The others didn't pay much attention. They were too busy comparing muscles and talking tough. But Aisha's movements were smooth, focused, sharp. Years of secret training lived in her hands and feet. She had trained in Krav Maga since she was 14. Not in a gym, not in public, she had learned from old books. Private teachers and long, hard nights. No one in that room knew that to them, she was just a quiet girl in the wrong place. But Aisha had her own reason to be here 2 years ago. Her younger sister had been attacked on the way home. The case was ignored. The police didn't help, people whispered. Why was she walking alone? No justice came that night. Aisha made a silent promise. "I will never be weak again." And she wasn't. She trained every day in secret. She worked 2 jobs and still found time to train. Not for glory, not for revenge, just to be ready. Just to protect, just to prove something, and now here she was. Standing among trained Marines who thought she didn't belong. They laughed, but she didn't. They played. But she prepared as the group moved into partner drills. Aisha was left alone. No one chose her. No one wanted to train with her. The instructor noticed and called out, "Pair up!" But still she stood alone. He walked over to her and said, "You good?" She nodded. "I'll wait," she said. The instructor looked at her again, longer this time. Something about her quiet confidence made him curious. He didn't say more, just moved on in her heart. Aisha knew this moment was only the beginning. They thought she didn't belong. They thought she was weak. But soon, the truth would speak louder than their laughter. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to argue. She would show them, not with words, but with action. And when that moment came, the whole room would go silent. The same people who laughed would be the first to clap. But for now she waited. Calm, steady, the girl who didn't belong was ready. The next morning, the training hall felt even louder. The Marines were pumped with energy, laughing harder, moving faster. The jokes flew through the air like flying knives. But none of them hit harder than the quiet one said behind her back. Aisha walked in quietly, just like before, same black clothes, same calm steps, same silent confidence. She didn't look left or right. She just walked straight to the edge of the mat. But behind her, the whispers started again. She came back? Must be looking for attention. She'll leave crying today. One Marine named Blake leaned close to his buddy and said, "Let's be honest, she's just playing games." The other replied, "Yeah, this isn't yoga class." They both chuckled. The instructor hadn't arrived yet. So the Marines were free to warm up, stretch, and of course, mock. One guy mimicked her soft voice. Another pretended to do a slow-motion fall. "Look, she took me down." More laughter followed, but Aisha didn't flinch. She heard them every single word, but she didn't respond. She tightened her ponytail and started her own warm-up. Her movements were clean, focused, almost like a quiet dance. Her balance was perfect, her breathing calm. Each stretch had control. Every move had meaning, but still no one saw her strength. They were too busy laughing, too busy judging. Blake suddenly tossed a towel toward her feet. It landed with a soft thump just inches away. "Oops," he said. "Sorry." Aisha looked at him, gave a small, polite nod, and stepped over the towel without a word. One of the younger Marines whispered, "She thinks she's better than us," another replied, "No, bro. She thinks she's invisible." But the truth was deeper than any of them knew. Aisha didn't think she was better. She didn't think she was invisible either. She just knew who she was and what she came to do. Her mind was not in the room, it was back in time. Back to a cold night 2 years ago, when she got the phone call no sister ever wants. Her younger sister, Alina, had been attacked, dragged into an alley just a few blocks from their home. By the time people found her, it was too late. Alina survived. But the light in her eyes was never the same. Aisha remembered sitting outside the police station for hours, waiting, hoping, praying. But all they got was paperwork, silence, and cold stares. She shouldn't have walked alone, the officer said. Aisha remembered every word, every excuse, and she promised herself something that night. I will never beg for protection again. So while these men were laughing, she had trained in silence. In sweat, in sorrow, she had punched walls, screamed into pillows, cried into her scarf but never stopped, never broke, never gave up. Today's training was about defense from front attacks. One by one, the Marines lined up to try it out. They paired with each other, showing flashy moves, tossing each other lightly on the mat. Fake effort. Fake struggle. Just play fights between friends. No one invited Aisha to pair. She stood at the edge again, watching, waiting, breathing, then finally, the instructor walked in. "All right, let's make this interesting," he said. "Let's have some fun." He looked around and pointed to Aisha. "You come up," he said, and, "Blake, you're her partner." Blake looked surprised. Then amused, he shrugged and walked forward, flexing his arms a little. "Don't worry, I'll go easy," he smirked. A few chuckles echoed in the room. Aisha stepped forward and stood across from him. She looked up at his face, didn't blink, didn't smile. The instructor gave the command. Scenario: Blake attacks, Aisha defends, go. Blake moved fast, pretending to grab her arm. But in that split second, she turned, locked his wrist, twisted her hips, and slammed him flat onto the mat. The room froze. Blake gasped, eyes wide, stuck on his back. Aisha stepped back, offered her hand to help him up. He didn't take it at first, then slowly reached, confused. The silence was louder than the laughter had ever been. Nobody joked. Nobody smiled. They were starting to see it now. This wasn't a game to her. This wasn't about showing off. This was survival. Truth, strength, and tomorrow she would be back again. And someone else would learn what Blake just did. That behind her silence was power, and behind their whispers was fear. The girl they laughed at? She had just started speaking, and she didn't need words to do it. The next day, the mood inside the training hall had changed. It was quieter, tighter, more focused. No one joked when Aisha walked in this time. There were no whispers, no towels tossed near her feet. Even Blake, the Marine she dropped yesterday, kept his eyes down. But the silence didn't feel respectful yet. It felt like a question. Who is she? Was it luck? Could she do it again? Aisha didn't look around. She wasn't here to seek approval or collect attention. She stretched in the corner, slow and steady, her mind calm, her body relaxed, like a storm waiting under still water. The instructor entered with a clipboard in hand. "Today's test is basic front choke defense," he said. "We're going to do it live." He scanned the room, then paused. "Volunteers?" he asked. Several hands went up. Jordan, the biggest and strongest Marine, grinned and stepped forward. Beside him came two others, Mick and Leo, both known for their speed and confidence. The instructor raised his eyebrows. "All right, I like the energy," he said. Then he turned to Aisha. "You ready?" She nodded once, no fear in her face. Her hands were relaxed, hanging loose by her sides. Her breath came soft and deep, like she'd done this 1,000 times. "Start light," the instructor warned the men. "Then we'll go full force." Mick was first. He stepped forward with a half smile. He didn't believe the hype. He thought yesterday was a trick, a lucky fall. He reached out slowly, pretending to grab Aisha by the collar. But before his fingers touched her shirt, she moved, fast like lightning. Her hand struck his wrist, twisted his elbow. She ducked under, locked his shoulder, and Mick hit the mat with a thud. It happened so fast that no one even reacted at first. Then came a few gasps. Mick lay on his back, stunned, blinking at the ceiling. Aisha stood over him, still breathing slow. She reached out a hand, and this time he took it. "Thanks," he muttered. Rubbing his shoulder, his smile was gone, replaced by something else, respect maybe, or curiosity. Next came Leo. Faster and more playful, he charged in with a half-spin move. But Aisha flowed with him. She didn't resist his strength. She redirected it, like water around a rock. Then with one sharp motion, she swept his leg, bent his arm, and pushed him down gently. He didn't fall hard. She was in full control. Even when she dropped him, she made sure he landed safely. Now the room was different. The Marines started moving closer. No one looked away, no one laughed, even Jordan. The strongest of them all narrowed his eyes and crossed his arms. The instructor nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Jordan, your turn." "Full force." Jordan cracked his neck and stepped forward. He was a wall of muscle, and he walked like a tank. He didn't speak. He just stared at Aisha with a quiet challenge. Aisha didn't flinch. She looked up at him, tiny in front of his size, but calm, so calm. Jordan moved in fast without warning. His large hands came at her neck. A real attack, full pressure, but again, Aisha didn't freeze. She exploded into motion. One hand shot up between his arms, breaking his grip. Her foot stepped offline, her hips turned. And then Jordan was in the air. And then he was on the mat, not gently, not softly. He landed with a deep, shaking thud. The entire room froze. The instructor didn't even blink. Jordan groaned, rolled over, and sat up slowly. He looked at Aisha for a long moment, then gave her a small nod. Aisha nodded back. Nothing more. She stepped back to her spot, still calm, still steady. The silence held for a few seconds, then someone clapped, then another, and then the whole room was clapping. It wasn't loud or wild, it was quiet, almost thoughtful, like they were saying sorry without words, like they finally saw what had been in front of them the whole time. Aisha didn't smile. She wasn't here for claps or praise. She was here to prove something, to herself, to her sister, to every girl who ever got told she couldn't. This wasn't just about throwing someone on the mat. This was about standing up when no one believed in you, about showing that silence doesn't mean weakness, that size doesn't decide strength. And as she walked out of the circle, one thing was finally clear to all of them. The girl who didn't belong had just led the most powerful demonstration in the room. After Aisha's final move, after Jordan hit the mat like a sack of bricks, the room went still. No one spoke, no one laughed. It was like the air had stopped moving. She didn't raise her arms, didn't smile, didn't show off. She simply stepped back, calm as ever, as if it was nothing. As if dropping the strongest man in the room was just another Tuesday. Jordan sat on the mat, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked up at her, and for the first time, his expression held something new. Not ego, not challenge, just quiet respect. He gave a small nod, not forced, not sarcastic, real. Aisha returned the nod and walked to the edge of the mat. The instructor looked around the room. "I hope you're watching," he said, voice sharp, "because this is what control looks like." He didn't say her name, but everyone knew who he meant. Aisha sat cross-legged in the corner again. Tying her shoelaces tighter, she didn't look up. But she could feel it, the eyes, the tension, the shift in energy. The silence was no longer cold. It was heavy, like a storm was coming, or maybe had already hit. Men who mocked her just yesterday now stood quietly, stealing glances her way. Some looked confused, others curious, a few embarrassed. It wasn't the throw that shocked them. It was the ease. The way she didn't even break a sweat. The way she didn't celebrate. Like she had nothing to prove, yet had proven everything. And that made them uncomfortable, a lot of them. Because deep down, it wasn't just about skill anymore, it was about pride. About the idea they all believed. That strength had a look, that strength had a sound. And Aisha shattered both ideas with one hand and one twist. The instructor called a short break. Everyone spread out to drink water and catch their breath. But the air didn't feel fresh, it felt thick with thoughts. Whispers returned, but now they were different. She's not just good, she's something else. Where did she learn that? Did you see how she controlled the landing? She didn't even hurt him, Jordan. Still quiet, stood at the edge, stretching his shoulders slowly. He didn't speak, but he kept watching her. He knew she wasn't here by luck. This was years of pain, work, first all hidden behind calm eyes. In one corner, Blake leaned against the wall, frowning. He didn't like this feeling, didn't like being wrong about her. Didn't like that the girl he mocked was now the one he had to learn from. He crossed his arms tighter. Jealousy hiding under his breath, Aisha noticed him staring. She didn't hold a grudge, she just felt sorry. Not for herself, for him. For all the people in the world who mistake quiet for weakness. Who think kindness is a gap to step on. Who think control means soft. The instructor called everyone back. Next section. Advanced hold escapes, he said. This will be paired drills. I'll assign partners. Tension snapped like a wire. Everyone knew what was coming, no one wanted to say it, but most were thinking it. What if I get paired with her? The instructor looked at his list. Blake and Aisha, he said plainly. The room stiffened. Blake didn't move for a second, then slowly stepped forward. Fists clenched too tight, Aisha stood up gently, adjusting her wrist wraps. Her face was calm, unreadable, not afraid, not proud, just steady. They stood across from each other. The instructor gave instructions. Simulate a headlock, medium force. Aisha escapes using method B. Blake raised his arms. A little too stiff, he looked at her and said in a low voice, I'm not going easy. Aisha nodded. Good, she replied. Neither am I. He moved fast, too fast. Wrapped his arm tight around her neck, bending her forward, but he made a mistake. He used anger, not control. Aisha's foot shifted, her hand reached under his grip. She bent her knees, turned her body, and in a blur, flipped him over her hip. Blake landed with a rough thud and a sharp gasp. The instructor didn't say anything. He just raised his hand and said, Clean. Aisha stepped back, offered her hand. Blake took it slowly, bitterly. His pride shattered louder than his fall. From that moment, the tension in the room took its final shape. Not fear, not hate, but deep, silent respect. They didn't laugh anymore. They didn't whisper behind her back. They just watched, learned, and wondered. Who was she really? What kind of fire lived inside that quiet girl's chest? And how many more surprises did she carry beneath her silence? The room was different now. No more laughter, no more mocking smiles. Aisha had turned their pride into silence, one throw at a time. But one man hadn't stepped forward yet. The biggest one, the most respected one, Jordan. He had watched everything, from the edge of the mat, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes sharp, not a word, not a grin, just quiet judgment. People didn't talk over Jordan, they didn't challenge him. Even the instructor gave him space. He wasn't just strong, he was experienced. And respected for a reason. Now it was his turn. The instructor looked around and said, Let's go advanced, real scenario. Jordan, take the lead. The Marines went still. They had seen what Aisha could do. But Jordan wasn't like the others. He was faster, bigger, smarter. He wouldn't go easy, not for a second. Jordan stepped forward slowly, his boots making soft thuds on the mat. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at Aisha, head tilted slightly. His expression was unreadable, calm but serious. Aisha met his gaze without blinking. No fear, no tension, just focus. She tied her hair tighter, then stepped onto the mat. The two stood face to face, the room holding its breath. Simulated aggressive hold, the instructor said. Jordan attacks. Aisha defends. No soft moves. Go real. Jordan didn't waste time. He rushed in with force, controlled but powerful. His hands went for her arm, twisting, locking her shoulder. A strong move designed to control and pin. His stance was solid, perfect form, but Aisha didn't panic. She moved with the pressure, not against it. She shifted her weight, dropped low, used his force against him, and in two sharp steps, broke the hold. Her elbow came under his. Her body turned, then Jordan was off balance. One more pivot, one sweep, and he was on the ground. Not slammed, not hurt, but down. Clean and fast, the kind of fall you don't fake. Gasps filled the air. Jordan lay still for a moment. Staring at the ceiling, he blinked once, then twice, then slowly sat up, rubbed his arm, and smiled, just a little. He looked at Aisha, and this time, it was different. I didn't go easy, he said. Voice low. I know, she replied. Simple and soft, he stood up and reached out. Not just to shake hands, but to lift her arm in front of everyone. She's not here to test us, he said. She's here to teach us. The room burst into quiet applause. No shouting, no fake cheers, just honest clapping, from men who had just seen something they couldn't deny. But in the back of the room, Blake watched with tight fists. He wasn't clapping, not because he still doubted her, but because deep inside, he hated how wrong he'd been. It wasn't just about strength anymore. It was about letting go of the ego, and some men hold on to that harder than anything else. The instructor walked over to Aisha. "I knew you had training," he said quietly. "I didn't know you had this much control." Aisha nodded. "I practiced for years," she said. "Never for a crowd. Just for one goal. To be strong enough so no one could hurt my family again." That sentence hit deeper than any throw. The instructor didn't ask questions, he just placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You've done more than that." By now, even the Marines who once laughed had begun to gather around her, asking questions, wanting to know her story. "How long did you train? Where did you learn that leg sweep? Will you teach us that block again?" Aisha answered simply, "No pride. No show, just teaching." She demonstrated slowly. Helping others get it right, she corrected footwork, showed angles, explained timing. She became what no one expected. The leader in a room full of warriors, but Jordan stayed nearby, watching, listening, learning. He had been the strongest until she stepped in. Now he realized real strength wasn't just about muscle or combat. It was about restraint, focus, and purpose. And Aisha carried all three in silence. As the session ended, the instructor made an announcement. "We're starting a weekend women's defense program next month," he said. "Aisha will be helping lead it." The Marines nodded, even clapped. No one questioned it, not anymore. The same girl they laughed at had earned every ounce of respect without asking for it. As Aisha picked up her bag and walked toward the door, she glanced back once. The room was different now, and so was the way they saw her. But she didn't come for applause. She came for truth, and in that moment, the truth had spoken louder than any shout. After the training session ended, Aisha walked out alone. The sun was setting, painting the sky with warm gold and soft pink. Her body was tired, but her steps were steady. The respect in that room had changed, finally. But her heart still carried a weight no one else could see. The Marines had seen her moves, they had felt her strength. But none of them knew why she was really there. They saw the outside, but not the storm she carried quietly inside. Aisha walked home with slow steps, past the coffee shop where she and her sister once laughed, past the alley she now avoided, past the place where her world had quietly cracked in half. It was 2 years ago. Her younger sister Alina had been walking home after her evening class, a route she had walked many times before. She never made it home that night on time. Aisha still remembered the phone call, the voice on the other end. "There's been an incident," they said. Her heart had dropped, her hands had gone cold. She ran through the streets like a madwoman, barefoot, sobbing when she found her sister. Alina was sitting on the hospital bed, her face bruised, her scarf torn. She wasn't crying, she looked like a ghost, broken, shaken, and silent. Aisha had wrapped her arms around her and whispered, I'm here. You're safe now." But she knew something had been stolen from her sister that night. Not just safety, but her peace, her belief in the world. They went to the police the next day, filed a report, gave statements, but no one really cared. The officer leaned back, chewing gum, and said, "She shouldn't have walked alone." That one sentence burned like acid inside Aisha's chest. That was the day something inside her snapped. She didn't scream, she didn't fight, she just stood, held Alina's hand, and walked out. That night, she made a vow under her breath. No more fear. No more begging for justice. If the world won't protect us, I'll learn how to protect us myself. From that day on, Aisha began training. She worked in the morning, studied in the afternoon, and in the silence of the night. She practiced punches, blocks, escapes, again and again until her muscles burned. She couldn't afford a gym, so she trained in her tiny room, used bags of rice as weights punched into pillows, watched grainy videos online. She saved for 6 months to afford one weekend self-defense class and then another. And another she told no one, not even Alina, because it wasn't for showing, it was for shielding. She was building something inside herself, not to become dangerous, but to become ready. Over time. Her movements became smooth. Her confidence returned, not loud, not bold, but quiet and solid. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need anyone's permission. Then one day an email arrived. A women's self-defense event was looking for skilled practitioners to test a Marine Corps training system. No age limit, no military background required, just real skill. Aisha applied quietly, and 2 weeks later she was selected. That's how she had walked into that training hall. Not to impress, not to compete, but to complete something. To stand for every girl who was told to stay home, every woman who was blamed for being hurt, every sister, every daughter, every silent voice that was dismissed, and now, standing in front of the mirror in her tiny bedroom, Aisha looked at herself, her shoulders straight, her eyes calm. She had scars inside and out, but she had turned them into armor. Behind her, Alina walked into the room holding 2 mugs of tea. "You were amazing today," Alina said softly. "I saw the video. Someone posted it online. You flipped that huge guy like he was a feather." Aisha smiled gently. "It wasn't about flipping him," she said. "It was about showing that we're not helpless." Alina sat down beside her and whispered, "I wish I had your strength." "You do," Aisha replied. "You survived. You stood up again. That's the hardest strength of all." The room fell quiet. The 2 sisters sipped tea in the warmth of their small space. No fancy medals. No crowd cheering. Just 2 hearts that had walked through pain and still stood tall. Aisha didn't speak much, but her silence was no longer made of fear. It was made of focus, of fire, of purpose. The Marines had seen the outside of her strength, but her true reason, her hidden reason, was right there beside her, drinking tea, smiling softly, healing slowly. And that reason was stronger than any opponent. Because love, when protected with quiet courage, becomes the fiercest force in the world. The next time Aisha entered the Marine training hall, something was different. It wasn't the walls or the lights or the mats. It was the air. It didn't feel heavy with doubt anymore. It felt lighter, like the air itself had started to listen. No one was laughing this time. No one was whispering behind her back. There were no smirks, no sideways glances. Instead, some of the Marines nodded. 1 or 2 even smiled, just a little. A few said softly, "Morning." And this time, it wasn't sarcasm, it was respect. Aisha walked to the center without hesitation, her movements still quiet, still smooth. But now they carried weight, not the weight of proving herself, but the weight of being seen. Finally, for who she really was, Jordan was already warming up. He caught her eye from across the room and gave her a slow nod. Blake stood nearby, silent but no longer bitter. He hadn't spoken to her since their drill, but he hadn't mocked her since either. Sometimes silence is the start of change. The instructor stepped into the hall. He looked around, took a breath, then smiled. It was rare for him, but today was a rare kind of day. "New phase starts today," he said. "We've seen strength. Now we focus on teaching." He paused, then turned to Aisha. "She's not a guest anymore," he added. "She's a contributor." A few Marines clapped, soft, respectful. No one rolled their eyes. Even the ones who hadn't liked her before were starting to see it. She had earned her place not by talking, but by doing. The instructor turned to her. "Aisha," he said, "would you walk the group through 3 escape techniques from yesterday's test?" She didn't blink, didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and stood at the front of the room. Everyone sat on the mat in a semicircle. It felt strange at first. 20 trained Marines sitting on the ground, eyes fixed on a girl they once called lost. But there they were. Waiting for her words, Aisha didn't speak loudly. She didn't perform or pose, she just explained each move clearly, showed it slowly. She picked volunteers, guided their footwork, corrected their balance. Her voice was soft but strong, her presence quiet but firm. And little by little, the Marines leaned in. They asked questions, not to challenge her, but to learn. One even said, "Can you show that part again?" Aisha smiled and nodded. She never made anyone feel small. She had been there on the outside, she knew what that felt like. And she refused to pass that feeling on. The session ended with clapping. Not forced, not polite, real, honest clapping. The instructor walked over and said, "That was better than I've seen in years." Afterward, a few Marines stayed behind. They didn't want to leave. They stood near her, awkward at first, then one said, "You know, you're kinda scary." Aisha raised an eyebrow. He laughed nervously and added, "I mean that as a compliment." The others laughed too, this time. Warmly, the room had changed, but so had they. Because when people see truth, it humbles them. And truth had taken them down to the mat, just like Aisha did. Outside the hall, the air was cool and clean. Aisha sat on the steps tying her shoes. The instructor came and sat beside her. "You've got a gift," he said. She shook her head. "I just learned what I needed to," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment. "Most people learn to protect themselves," he said. "You learned so you could protect others too, didn't you?" Aisha didn't speak. She just nodded slowly. That was her truth. That had always been her reason. He stood and added, I meant what I said. The Women's Self-Defense Program? It's yours now. You'll be leading it with Jordan. Her eyes widened a little. You're serious? Completely, he said. You've already led them without even trying. The next week, a new banner was hung outside the training hall. Weekend Warriors, Women's Self-Defense Program, led by Aisha. Word spread fast. Young women, mothers, college students, even female police officers signed up. They wanted to learn not from books, not from theories, but from someone who had lived it. And when Aisha stood at the front of that new class, wearing her plain black shirt and calm expression, the women looked at her with wide, hopeful eyes, and she smiled. Because this was what she had dreamed of, not praise, not power, but giving others the strength to stand tall too. The atmosphere had changed, not just in that training hall, but inside her, inside them. Because real power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits.
And when it rises, it changes everything. The small hall was full before the clock even hit 9 a.m.
Women from all ages and backgrounds walked in with nervous smiles and hopeful eyes. Some wore sweatpants, some wore uniforms. One woman came in holding her daughter's hand. Another clutched a notebook like she might need to take notes just to breathe. They weren't here for medals, they weren't here for belts or ranks. They were here because they were tired. Tired of walking fast when they heard footsteps behind them. Tired of being told, just stay home. Tired of fear. At the front of the room stood Aisha. Same black clothes, same calm eyes. But something in her posture had changed. She no longer stood alone now. The silence around her wasn't filled with judgment. It was filled with trust. Jordan stood beside her. Clipboard in hand, he had asked to help, and she said yes. Not because she needed him, but because even strength grows stronger with unity. He didn't try to lead. He followed her rhythm, and she respected him more for it. Aisha stepped forward and faced the group. I want you to know something, she said softly. I wasn't born strong. I became strong because I had to, and now, I want you to know that you can too. The women listened. Eyes wide, not because she spoke loudly, but because every word came from truth. Truth recognizes truth, and her voice carried it like a torch. The session began. Aisha moved through basic stances, balance, escape holds. She walked around correcting hands. Guiding feet, she didn't shout, she encouraged gently. One girl couldn't get the wrist release right. Aisha smiled and said, try again. Not harder, smarter. The girl laughed nervously and tried again. And this time it worked. Her eyes lit up. She looked at her own hands like they were brand new. Somewhere near the back, the mother who came with her daughter whispered, she makes it feel possible. And that was the heart of it. Aisha didn't teach fighting. She taught possibility outside the room. The Marines watched through the glass. Some of them were the same ones who once laughed at her. Now they stood with arms folded, not in challenge. But in quiet pride, Blake leaned in and said, she built this from nothing, Jordan replied. No, she built this from pain and turned it into power. After the session, a young woman stayed behind. She looked unsure, like she wanted to speak but didn't know how. Aisha walked over and offered her water. The girl took it and whispered, I was attacked last year. Aisha didn't interrupt, didn't ask for details, she just sat beside her. The girl continued, I stopped going out, stopped talking, stopped feeling, but seeing you, it gave me hope again, like maybe I don't have to live in fear forever. Aisha placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't, she said, fear is real. But so is healing, so is strength. And you're already strong for just showing up today. Tears filled the girl's eyes, not from pain but from release. From knowing someone finally understood, not from books, not from lectures, but from living the same storm. Later that evening, Aisha sat alone at the edge of a quiet park. The sky above her stretched in colors, orange melting into purple. She watched as kids played on the swings. A couple jogged by. A dog barked at the wind. Everything felt calm. She took out her old phone, opened her notes app, and added one more line to the promise she wrote 2 years ago. Back when her sister was hurt and her heart shattered, that promise had said, I will never be weak again. Now she added, I will never let another woman feel alone again. Behind her, Alina walked up holding 2 ice creams. Double chocolate, she said with a grin. Aisha laughed. You remembered? They sat in silence, side by side, not as broken girls, but as survivors, as sisters who had walked through fire and came out carrying water for others still burning. The world hadn't changed overnight. There were still dangers, still injustices, but in this little corner of the world, change had begun, one woman at a time, and it started with one girl who was laughed at during practice, who never shouted, never argued. She just dropped 4 Marines in seconds, then turned their silence into support and their judgment into applause. Aisha didn't need fame, she didn't want it, but without even trying, she had become a quiet kind of hero, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, just shows others the way forward, step by steady step, hold by strong hold, heart by healing heart, and that was only the beginning.